A few days before Halloween one year, my friend, who I'll call Emily, decided to host a sleepover at her house with me and a few of our other friends. It started like any normal sleepover with lots of laughing and chatting about school and the boys we were crushing on at the moment. When it got later in the night, one of my friends suggested that we play a game of truth or dare. I was totally up for it, but Emily shook her head and said that she had something even more exciting we could play. She reached into her sleeping bag and pulled out a long, thin box containing a Ouija board. She told us she had borrowed it from someone at school. She looked at us with excitement in her eyes and asked if we were down to play with it. She wanted to try to do a seance and see if we could contact any ghosts. I wasn't sure if I believed in ghosts, but my mom had always wanted me to never play with a Ouija board. She told me that it was just a way of opening a window to dark, bad things. I was hoping my other friends would feel the same way and say they didn't want to play, but surprisingly, they all seemed up for it too. I didn't want to let on that I was scared, so I just stayed quiet and decided to go along with it. Maybe nothing would happen. Emily and another one of our friends, who I'll call Sarah, decided to go first. We dimmed the lights in the room and lit some candles to add to the creepy mood. When they were ready, they all sat on the floor with the board placed on a coffee table as the rest of us gathered around them. Sarah and Emily both placed their fingers on a triangular pointer and began asking questions. The first question they asked was whether or not a spirit was there. At first, nothing happened, but then the dial began to slowly inch its way to the top of the board where the word yes was located. Both Emily and Sarah looked at each other in shock, each one of them swearing they weren't moving their hands at all. When the dial reached yes, I was uneasy, but still not convinced that Emily or Sarah hadn't just pushed it themselves. The next question they asked was whether or not the spirit had anything it wanted to say. I watched, my heart beating quickly, as the pointer began to move slowly across the board. To all of our shock, it spelled out the words, "my house." At this point, we were all getting pretty creeped out. We didn't know what the message meant, so Emily asked the spirit to explain itself. The pointer began to move yet again, this time spelling out a message that sent a chill throughout my entire body. It spelled the words, "get out." No sooner had the pointer stopped moving, the lights suddenly went out and we all screamed. We were in darkness for a couple of seconds and then the lights went back on. Emily gasped, clutching her arm. We looked over at her and saw a deep red scratch running from her elbow to her shoulder. We all screamed yet again and ran upstairs. I ended up being too scared to spend the night there and had my mom come pick me up. After that, I'll never so much as be in the same room as a Ouija board ever again. During my freshman year of high school, I became friends with a girl who I'll call Bella for the sake of her privacy. A week before her birthday, Bella told me she wanted to have me and a couple of other girls over at her house for a sleepover to celebrate. It was going to be pretty casual. We were just gonna hang out, eat pizza, and probably watch a movie. It sounded like fun, so of course I agreed. On the night of the party, I knocked on the door and Bella greeted me, looking very excited. I was the first person there and Bella guided me to the kitchen where she introduced me to her mom. Her mom was very pretty and super sweet and welcoming. We chatted for a bit and she ordered a pizza for us before heading out for a girls' night with her friends. After Bella had finished opening up her presents, it was getting pretty late, so we decided to start the movie. We were all watching in silence when we heard a loud pounding on the front door. I was confused. Had Bella's mom forgotten her keys? Bella looked concerned as she walked to the door. She looked through the peephole and then jumped back, making sure the door was locked securely. We were all confused and asked her what was going on. She told us that her parents were divorced and her dad lived in a different state. Her mom later started dating this guy who lived with them at her house, but over time she realized he had some major anger issues and was aggressive, so she broke up with him. He didn't take the breakup well and had been harassing her ever since. We were all terrified and decided that the best thing to do was to call Bella's mom and have her come back home early. But before Bella could even pick up the phone, we heard a male's voice behind us. We spun around and realized that the man had broken into the house through the screened-in porch. He was drunk and appeared livid as he approached Bella and asked her where her mom was. Bella was shaking as she told him that her mom had gone out and she didn't know where she was. The man didn't believe her and grasped her arm tightly and got right up in her face as he asked again where her mom was. Bella struggled trying to get free, but the man only grabbed her other arm, squeezing so hard that she yelped in pain. I screamed at him to let her go, but he only held on tighter. I was desperate to get the man's attention off of Bella, so I spoke up and told her that Bella's mom was upstairs in her bedroom. He stared at me for a minute before releasing his grip on Bella and headed towards me. He cupped my face in his hands and put his face close to mine. He told me that if I was lying to him, I was about to be very sorry. He then gave me a hard push, causing me to fall to the ground and slam my head on the floor so hard that I saw stars. He then turned and headed upstairs to investigate. The second he did, Bella flung open the door and the girls and I sprinted out of the house and across the street to the neighbor's house. I could hear him screaming at us, but he couldn't catch up. The neighbor welcomed us in and after hearing our story called the police, who showed up very soon after. The man was taken into custody and charged with breaking and entering and harassment. Bella's mom got a restraining order, and luckily, she has not seen him since. When I was in high school, my friend, who I'll call Ava, invited me over to her house for a sleepover. I had never been to her house before, or even met her family, so I didn't know what to expect. But Ava was one of my good friends, so I was excited to be able to spend time with her outside of school. After telling my parents what my plans were, I plugged her address into my car's GPS and headed to her house. She lived in a nice part of town where the houses were really expensive. After driving through a beautiful neighborhood, I finally got to Ava's house, which was even more stunning than I expected. When I rang the doorbell, her mother answered the door. She was very friendly and told me that Ava was just finishing up getting ready and would be downstairs in a bit. Ava had a little sister who was sitting at the table eating dinner. She told me that she and Ava also had an older brother named Rick, but that he didn't like hanging out with the rest of the family. Ava's mom cut in, telling me that Rick was just a moody teenager who liked to spend most of his time alone in his room. Ava came downstairs and I was quickly distracted from the conversation. We headed up to her room where we spent most of the night just chatting and watching funny YouTube videos together. When it got late, Ava walked me to their guest room, which was right next to her room. I would have been content with a sleeping bag, but was grateful for the queen-sized bed that would be all mine for the night. Ava bid me goodnight before heading off to her room, and I crawled into bed, completely exhausted. In the middle of the night, I heard the bedroom door make a slight creaking sound as it opened. I froze and pretended to be asleep, not knowing what to do. I then heard footsteps slowly crossing the room towards me. Whoever had walked into the room was standing so close to me that I could feel their breathing on my neck. They then reached out and began stroking my hair. Ava wasn't the type of person to play pranks, and I knew it couldn't be her. At last, I gathered my courage and rolled over to see who was touching me. There, inches from my face, was a teenage boy. I realized it must be Rick. In his hand, he was holding a camera that he had clearly been using to take pictures of me. "What the heck are you I began to say, but the boy took the pillow next to me and covered my mouth with it so I couldn't speak or even breathe. I struggled frantically against him until I finally freed myself. I began screaming for help, awaking Ava and the rest of her family. I told them what Rick had done, and then they apologized profusely. Ava's parents told me that their son just had some strange habits and that he didn't mean any harm. Nothing they said was going to console me enough to sleep there for the rest of the night. I called my mom, who came and picked me up. I never went back to that house again after that. Have you ever had a scary experience at a sleepover? Drop a comment and be sure to like and subscribe. Sleep tight.